Hello, I'm JForceG, and welcome to the first video on modeling. This is going to be our intro to modeling, and by the end of it, we should have a low poly head similar to this. So let's just get into it. So first, we're going to get into some basic hotkeys. These hotkeys are very important to learn if you want to do some low poly modeling, or just modeling in general, really, if you're not sculpting. If you know some of these hotkeys, stick around, because there might be some nuance in why we use certain hotkeys that you might not be familiar with. Tab. Tab is a very important hotkey that I didn't include over here, mostly because I think it deserves its own section. So I have this text object that I'm going to convert to a mesh by going to Object, Convert, Mesh. And what tab does, and it allows you to toggle between the last mode you were on. So by default, it's Object and Edit. By default, you're in the Object mode, and pressing tab puts you in Edit mode. So in Edit mode, I can now move vertices around, move faces and such. And yeah. G is also an important hotkey you want to learn. So we can just click on an object and press G, and we can move it. We can also press G and Z to move on the Z axis, and we'll see it right here. And G and X on the X-axis, and G and Y on the Y-axis. B allows us to select multiple objects, like this here. And it also allows us to select multiple faces. And if we're in edge mode, and if we're in vertice mode, which are here in the top left, you could either click them or press 1, 2, and 3. Control R is so we can loop cut, do various, click on our cube here. Control R, we can make cuts. As you can see here. Now the reason why we use loop cuts instead of, for an example, just subdividing is because subdividing can lead to some topology issues on your mesh. This right here is the difference between good topology and bad topology. The one on the left is bad, one on the right is good. The reason why we want our topology to be good is there's two reasons I could think of on the top of my head. For one, the shading will look bad. So on the left here, if light were to bounce off these faces here, it would look off. It would look a little strange. Another reason why you'd want good topology is for the purposes of rigging and adding bones to your mesh. So hypothetically, if we were to add bones to the mouth of this mesh and try to make it smile, there would more than likely be issues in how that mesh bends due to its poor topology. So it's really good. It's a good practice to try your best to make everything straight and sort of like uniform. And that's why it's a good idea to use loop cutting instead of subdividing. Because loop cutting, by default, when you start a loop cut, it's in the middle. It's not over here, it's not over there, it's right in the origin of the edge. Whereas if you were to start selecting a face and subdivide, see, this would look weird when you shade it, when you add a light source. It would look strange because these faces would be shaded differently than these faces. I, as in set faces. I'm such a dork. But what inset faces does is it does what it says. You press I on a face, and you kind of like inset it. And with this, you could do all sorts of fun stuff. It's very similar to beveling. Beveling is, I think, Control B, and yeah, it's useful for making things like houses and stuff like that, but for this tutorial video, we won't be using bevel, we'll be using inset faces. Because I find personally that inset faces gives you more control over, you know, because every time you bevel, it creates more faces and more vertices. Here. S as in scale. Now, if we were to press S with our cube selected, it gets smaller and bigger. But if we want it to scale on a specific axis, which you'll see on the top right here, we got our Y and X axis. So SX allows it to scale on the X axis. SY allows it to scale on the Y axis. And SX, or SZ, sorry, allows us to scale on the Z axis. To make it easier to understand, I added a cube that is more straightened out than that one. So SZ on the Z axis, SX on the X axis, and SY on the Y axis. A fun trick you could use if you want to manipulate two vertices at once, or two edges, is you can press S to scale and scale it in or out on that axis. So let's say I wanted these two vertices here to go inward. I could press S, look on the top right. Okay, I could see the X-axis is what I want to bring it in. Yeah, I want to use to bring it in. So S, X, and then we're bringing it in, and then we're bringing it out. Yeah. One thing I want you to keep in mind when learning Blender is that everything you do is relative to your viewpoint. So if I were to press Tab and go into face select mode and choose a face and move it, this movement is going to be almost relative to the viewpoint. So if I move it here, and that's why it might be important for you, in most cases, to use G and press on the axis. Finally, we have the Numpad buttons. We have Numpad 1, 3, and 7. Now, if you don't have the Numpad buttons, or a Numpad rather, that's okay, because we can go to Edit, Preferences, and then we can go to Input, and right here we have Emulate Numpad. And what that does is it allows you to press the normal 1 through 0, 1 through 9 buttons to simulate that. For demonstration purposes, I made this cube boy here. And if I were to press 1, we are now looking at him from the front. And if I were to press 3 on the numpad, and or if you have the other one selected, we are now on the right. And 7, we are looking at his hair on the top of his head. But what if we wanted to, say, look on the left side or the back? This is where the other numpad hotkey comes in. This one right here. So what this does, what the numpad 9 does, is it sets your viewpoint the opposite that's relative to your view. So right now, if I press 9, press 9 again, right? So now, if I press 1 to make sure we're at our front view here, and then press 9 look, we're looking at his back abs. So 3, 9, we're looking on his left side, 3's his right side, 7 is his top side, and then if I press 7, 9, we're at his bottom side, which isn't a side, it's his bottom. So yeah, these are some hotkeys, and it honestly becomes fun in your mind, for me it did anyways, when you realize, like, this is a skill, you know, this is a skill I could get better at, and your muscle memory really does do the work after a while. It's really cool. I'd recommend writing these down or even screen capping this video if you want to follow along. But in the meantime, practice, practice, practice. In the next video, we'll start actually modeling, and it'll be amazing. It'll be so much fun. But yeah, thanks for watching this. Please consider joining my Patreon. If you are a younger viewer, please don't be a patron. It feels weird for me personally. If you do want to be a patron, please get your parents' consent, and, you know, maybe a letter or some sort. But don't worry about it if you're younger. Yeah, thanks for watching.